I can still hear the footsteps. Some nights, when the wind rattles the windows and the house settles with those deep, aching groans, I hear them pacing above me. Slow, deliberate, just like that night in the lodge. I tell myself it's the old beams or a stray raccoon in the attic, but I know better. I know what footsteps sound like when they're meant for you. It started as a getaway, a weekend to escape the grind, breathe in the pine-scented air, and maybe relive some of our carefree college days. Just me, Maddie, and the old crew, Chris, Tyler, and Emily. We hadn't been together like this in years. Life had pulled us in every direction, jobs, bills, and the slow erosion of time. So when Maddie found a listing for a hunting lodge buried deep in the Black Hills, South Dakota, it felt like fate. A secluded, rustic charm, the listing promised. An escape from the modern world. We should have known nothing good comes easy. The drive was endless, the road narrowing from asphalt to gravel and then to a twisting, overgrown trail that scraped the sides of Chris's SUV. Pines loomed high and tight on either side, swallowing the daylight. The GPS sputtered and died halfway up the trail. Maddie joked that we were officially off the grid. I laughed with her then. I don't laugh about it now. We reached the lodge as the sun dipped low, casting the forest in molten amber. The building was a corpse of its former self. 2 stories, weathered timber, and a sagging porch with shutters hanging by rusted hinges. Faint scratches marred the doorframe, like something had clawed at it. "Looks cozy," Chris said, his grin tight with unease. No one laughed. Inside, the air was stale and cold, carrying the scent of mildew and something faintly metallic. Dust smothered every surface, and the furniture, a leather couch with cracked upholstery, a battered coffee table, felt frozen in time. The walls bore the scars of age, cracked plaster and, disturbingly, long gouges that ran in jagged patterns from floor to ceiling. "Maybe bears?" Tyler offered, though his voice lacked conviction. Maddie and I claimed a room upstairs where the mattress sagged in the middle and the window stuck halfway open. The others spread out. Chris and Emily in the room next door, Tyler downstairs on the couch. We set a fire, cracked open some beers, and tried to push the tension aside. But something was wrong with the silence in that place. It wasn't the peaceful kind you find in nature. It was heavy, smothering, like a room holding its breath. The crackle of the fire barely touched it, and our laughter felt thin and strained. We kept glancing at the windows, at the corners of the room, as if expecting to see someone, or something, watching. As the night thickened, the noises began. It started with a soft crunching outside, like footsteps in the leaf litter, slow and circling. "Probably a deer," Maddie whispered, but her hand found mine and her fingers felt cold. We tried to ignore it until Chris, ever the loudmouth, decided to check. "Bambi's got us all spooked," he teased, pulling on his jacket and stepping onto the porch. The door creaked as it swung open. Outside, the night pressed in, thick and impenetrable. "Hello?" Chris called, his voice too bold, too brittle. The wind answered with a low moan through the trees. A branch snapped in the darkness. Close. Chris froze. Then, the front door slammed shut on its own. Hard. Chris stumbled back inside, his face pale. "Wind," he muttered, but his voice shook. "Just the wind." The fire seemed dimmer after that, the shadows longer. We tried to distract ourselves with stories and drinks, but the mood was poisoned. Then we heard the second sound. Thump, thump, thump. It came from above us, the attic. Heavy, dragging footsteps, pacing slowly from one end of the house to the other. The hair on my arms stood up. "I thought you said this place was empty," Emily whispered, her voice tight with fear. "It is," I said. But I knew that was a lie. Someone was up there. Or something. Chris grabbed the fireplace poker, his knuckles white. "I'll check it out." "No," I said, standing. "Don't be an idiot." But the attic door answered for us, creaking open with a long, aching groan. Cold air spilled down, carrying with it the scent of rot. No one moved. Then, something began descending the stairs. I can't explain how I knew it wasn't human. Maybe it was the weight of those steps. Too slow, too deliberate. or the way they seemed to scrape against the wood like nails on bone. I felt Maddie's hand gripping my arm, trembling. "We need to go," she whispered. The front door wouldn't open. The knob twisted uselessly in my hand. Locked. "Back window," I shouted. Tyler hurled a chair through the glass, shards exploding outward into the night. I shoved Maddie through first, then Emily and Chris. I felt the cold whip against my skin as I climbed through. And I made the mistake of looking up. There, in the attic window, it stood. Its shape was human but wrong. Too tall, too thin, its limbs stretched unnaturally. Its face, if you could call it that, was a hollow smear, a suggestion of features that made the mind rebel. But its eyes, those I saw clearly. They were not eyes, they were holes. Black, gaping, endless. And they were locked on me. I felt something crawl into my chest then, something cold and hollow, a terror so pure it tasted metallic in my throat. "Run!" Maddie screamed, her voice ripping through my paralysis. We tore into the trees, branches whipping at our faces, the earth soft and treacherous beneath our feet. Behind us, the lodge stood silent, too silent, except for the sound of splintering wood, the front door breaking open. I ran until my legs burned, until my breath was knives in my throat. But I knew... I knew it was still watching. Even through the thick curtain of trees, I felt its gaze on my back. We reached the road, our bodies battered, our hands bloodied from the branches. Chris's SUV stood there, salvation and sanctuary. We piled in, and Chris, shaking so badly he could barely manage the keys, gunned the engine. The tires spun, then caught, and we shot down the dirt trail, the trees blurring past in a fevered haze. Only when we reached the main road did anyone speak. Maddie's voice, small and broken. "What? What was that?" I couldn't answer, but as I looked back through the rearview mirror, I saw the lodge, a shrinking smudge in the distance, and in the attic window, though we were miles away, I saw it still standing there, watching, waiting. I never went back. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind rattles the roof and the house settles with those deep, aching groans, I hear it. The footsteps, soft and steady, pacing, and I know it found me. I thought the lodge would be the end of it. I thought if we ran far enough, fast enough, we'd leave whatever it was behind. But nightmares don't care about distance. They follow you. They find you. That's something I've learned the hard way. I tried to shake it off after that weekend. Maddie and I stopped talking to Chris, Tyler, and Emily. It was easier to pretend none of it happened if we pretended they didn't exist. But I couldn't pretend forever. Not when the footsteps started again. Only this time, they weren't coming from my attic. They were following me somewhere else. My Uncle Bill was the closest thing to a father I ever had. He taught me how to bait a hook and how to gut a fish. His hands were worn leather, his voice rough from too many cigarettes, but his laugh, it was warm, real. When he called me up asking if I wanted to join him and my cousin David for a weekend at Stillwater Lake, I almost said no. The thought of another secluded getaway made my skin crawl. But I hadn't seen Uncle Bill in years, and David... Hell, we used to be inseparable. Besides, I figured some fresh air, some time on the water would help me clear my head. I was wrong. Stillwater Lake was the kind of place that didn't want to be found. We followed winding roads through miles of pines so thick they swallowed the sky. No cell service, no road signs, just the crunch of gravel and the steady groan of Uncle Bill's old Ford as we pushed deeper into nowhere. When the lake finally appeared through the trees, it was like glass, so still it didn't look real. Pines lined the shore, their reflections perfect, and the sky bled orange and gold across the water. It should have felt peaceful, but the second I stepped out of the truck, my stomach knotted. The air felt wrong. Too still, too heavy. The lake didn't smell like water. It smelled cold, like metal, like something that had been waiting. Uncle Bill, of course, didn't notice. "Ain't she beautiful?" he grinned, already pulling out his tackle box. "Best fishing you'll ever see, I promise." David clapped me on the back, his grin wide and easy. "You ready to show me those skills, city boy?" I tried to smile back, but my lips felt stiff. "Yeah," I lied. "Let's catch some monsters." We launched the boat as the sun dipped low. The water was so calm the oars barely made a sound, just a soft plunk, plunk that seemed to echo too far. We drifted toward the center, where the water darkened to ink. I felt it then, the way you feel someone staring at you from across a room. My skin prickled. I turned to the shore and froze. A man stood there, pale, gaunt. His clothes hung in tatters and his feet were submerged up to his calves, but he didn't move. He just watched us. No binoculars, no fishing rod, no reason to be there, just two hollow eyes fixed on me. "Hey," I whispered, nudging David. "You see that guy?" David squinted, then frowned. "Weird. Think he's lost?" Uncle Bill, ever the fisherman, barely looked up. "Probably a local. People up here are friendly. Ignore him." But I couldn't. The man never shifted, never blinked, just stood. My mouth felt dry. "Yeah, friendly." We stayed on the water till the sun was gone and the stars came out, cold and sharp, but I couldn't focus on fishing. The whole time I felt eyes on my back. When we finally rowed to shore and set up camp by the trees, I kept scanning the darkness. The man was gone. I should have felt relief. I didn't. We sat by the fire, the crackling and Uncle Bill's stories filling the night. But under it all was the silence, that awful, suffocating silence, like the woods were holding their breath. The lake so still it could have been glass. The trees standing too straight, too still. The wind didn't even whisper. Then we heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Soft, rhythmic. From the water. We turned together, and there it was. The boat. But it wasn't where we left it. It had drifted from the shore, rocking slightly, tapping against a half-submerged log. "The hell," Bill muttered, standing. I tied her off. He started toward the water, but David grabbed his arm. "Wait, look!" I felt my heart drop. Around our campsite, circling the tent and leading back to the water, wet footprints. Bare. Human. Too large for any of us. "Jesus," Uncle Bill whispered. "Someone's screwing with us." He pulled his hunting knife from his belt. "Stay back." But it wasn't someone. I knew that. I felt it. "Bill," I said, my voice tight. "We need to go, now." The air felt too thick, too cold. The shadows by the trees seemed to shift, to move. I grabbed David's arm, and he didn't argue. We turned for the truck, and stopped cold. The man was there, but he wasn't on the shore. He was between us and the trees, closer. Too close, and his eyes, God, his eyes. I've never seen anything so empty, so wrong. Like they weren't eyes at all, just holes into something else, something that shouldn't be here. His mouth hung slightly open, too wide, and I swear, I saw something moving behind his teeth. Uncle Bill, God bless him, still tried to be the tough guy. "Hey," he barked, raising his knife. "Get the hell away from us." The man didn't move, didn't flinch, but I felt it. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath. I heard the water behind me start to lap, fast, like something was rising from below, and then he smiled. Not a real smile, a tearing, a breaking. His lips cracked at the corners, and something dark seeped from the skin. That's when we ran. We sprinted for the trees, but the pines seemed to stretch, to close in. I felt the earth shift beneath my feet, like it didn't want to let me go. My heart was a drumbeat in my ears. I heard Uncle Bill gasping behind me, David cursing between breaths, but above it all, the footsteps. Fast, wet, slapping against the earth, chasing. We broke into the clearing where the truck waited, and Uncle Bill, faster than I've ever seen him, wrenched the door open. "Get in," he roared. David dove for the passenger seat. I yanked open the back door, scrambling in, my chest burning. The engine sputtered. "Come on," Uncle Bill shouted, slamming the key again. Tap. My stomach dropped. The man, not in front, not behind, beside me. his face pressed against the rear window, his eyes wide, empty, and grinning. His hand lifted, fingers impossibly long. The engine roared to life. The truck lurched forward, throwing me against the seat. Glass shattered. The window behind me exploded as his hand shot through, clawing at my jacket. I screamed, kicking back, feeling the cold bite of his skin. Then he was gone. Just gone. The truck barreled down the dirt road, trees blurring into a tunnel of darkness. Uncle Bill's hands were iron on the wheel, his knuckles bone-white. David was shaking, his breath ragged. I sat frozen, my heart trying to break through my ribs. We didn't stop, didn't speak. Not until the pines broke and the highway lights burned into the night like salvation. Finally, Uncle Bill's voice, hollow, broken. What the hell was that? I couldn't answer. I just stared at my reflection in the cracked window and saw a smear, a handprint, from the inside. I thought the lodge would be the end. I thought if I ran far enough, fast enough, I'd leave whatever it was behind. But nightmares don't care about distance. I know that now, because it's still here. It found me once, and it's waiting. I know it's waiting, because every night, I hear the tapping. I didn't sleep after the lake. You can't sleep when your brain won't stop replaying something you can't explain. I kept hearing the tapping on the boat, kept seeing those footprints, kept feeling those eyes. But the worst part, the part that makes me question my own sanity, is that I started seeing that man in places he shouldn't be. Reflected in windows, standing too far down the street, always watching. I don't tell anyone. Who would believe me? You run from something like that, but it stays. It finds you. You carry it. I thought distance might help. So I buried myself in work, long drives, remote jobs, anything to keep moving. That's how I ended up here, beneath the Bloodstone Bridge. The bridge wasn't much to look at, an old, crumbling iron skeleton spanning a dry riverbed, long abandoned by trains and time. The company sent me to inspect its supports and log any safety hazards before they demolished it. Simple job, in and out, or so I thought. The air out here was different, too hot, too dry, and somehow hollow. Even the wind sounded wrong, whistling through the beams like something whispering without words. My boots crunched against the gravel as I walked the perimeter. Rust clung to the metal like dried blood. It was hot, midday, sun bearing down, but under the bridge the shadows felt unnaturally cold, and that's when I saw it. Tucked beneath the farthest support beam was an old trailer, rusted, battered, and half swallowed by desert dust. No reason for it to be there, no roads, no tracks, just there. And I felt it again, that heaviness in my chest, that squeeze of instinct telling me to leave it alone. But I'm an idiot. Curiosity isn't kind to people like me. The trailer's windows were smashed, its door barely hanging on one hinge. The metal was carved up with deep scratches, but not the kind from wear and tear. These were deliberate. Symbols, faces, all of them hollow-eyed, their mouths open in silent screams. I should have turned back, but instead, I opened the door. The stench hit first, metallic and thick. I felt a literal. Inside was worse, a nest of rags, bones, both animal and something that looked too human for comfort. And more of those faces, scratched into every surface, hundreds of them. But what made my blood freeze was the one on the far wall. It was bigger than the others, and it wasn't finished. No eyes. But the rest, it was me. A soft crunch behind me. My heart jumped into my throat. I spun around. A man stood there, filthy, with hair matted to his face, his clothes hanging in tatters, his skin cracked and sunburned, stretched too thin over bone. But his smile, God, that smile, too wide, too knowing. "You're on my land," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves crushed underfoot. I raised my hand, stepping back slowly, my heel scraping against bones. "Hey, I didn't mean to trespass, just doing my job. I'll leave, okay?" He didn't move, didn't blink, but his smile got wider. "You're already staying." That's when I saw it, the trailer door. It wasn't open anymore. I felt my fingers shaking as I reached for the revolver on my hip, a precaution I always carried on remote jobs. I pointed it straight at his chest. "Step back," I warned, my voice unsteady. The man's smile split into something worse, a sneer of amusement. Think that'll help you? He took a step forward, bare feet grinding against the gravel. They always bring guns. They always shoot. Never works. I fired. The shot cracked the air, deafening in the silence. The man jerked. Blood bloomed dark across his chest. But he didn't fall. He didn't react. His body stood, but his face, only his face, changed. The smile faded into something cold. Shouldn't have done that, he said. And then he started toward me. I ran. My body moved before my brain did, sprinting through the dry riverbed, slipping on loose stones. I could hear him behind me. Not footsteps, but something worse. A dragging. Like his body wasn't moving right. I hit the side of the bridge, hands scraping on hot metal as I pulled myself up the embankment. The gravel road, my truck, was ahead, almost there, almost the sky. The sky went dark, no warning, no clouds, just gone. My breath seized. The sun, the shadows, all erased. I could barely see my truck, just 20 feet away. I stumbled toward it, my legs screaming, but then, the gravel, crunch, in front of me. I stopped. The man was there. In front of me. But it wasn't him, not exactly. His body, twisted. His limbs wrong, too long, too sharp. And his eyes. God, his eyes. No pupils. No whites, just hollow, and I knew those were the same eyes I saw on the walls, on the faces. I backed away, my voice barely a whisper. What are you? The thing's mouth moved, but the voice wasn't his anymore, it was mine. You're already staying. My heart, my chest, something cracked inside me, and then it let me go. The sky snapped back to blinding blue, the heat returned, crushing and real. I was standing alone on the gravel road. The man, thing, gone. The trailer, gone. I ran to my truck, shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine roared and I tore down the road, not daring to look back. But I didn't escape, I know that now, because when I got home, the faces were waiting on my garage door, carved, hundreds of them, and at the center, I'm not yet. I didn't go home after the bridge. I couldn't. Something changed in me beneath Bloodstone. I felt it, a splinter lodged somewhere deep. Even when I got back to the truck, when the trailer and that thing vanished, the weight of it didn't lift. It clung to me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those faces carved into my garage door. No eyes, just screaming mouths. And worse, the unfinished one, me. It was waiting. So I did what felt right. I ran. I drove. Drove until the desert melted into hills, until the hills broke into thick, skeletal trees, until night swallowed the sky whole. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stop. My hands ached from gripping the wheel, my eyes burned from the highway blur, and that's when I saw the sign, and Hollow Brook Innit, neon letters half dead, the vacancy sign buzzing like a dying insect. It stood alone, hunched on the side of a cracked highway, its paint peeling, windows dim and greasy. I should have kept driving, but exhaustion was an anchor and the thought of a bed, any bed, felt like salvation. I pulled into the lot, the gravel crunching beneath my tires. Only 2 other cars, both dusty, parked as if they hadn't moved in years. The place felt forgotten, a motel no one found, only people like me, lost people. I grabbed my bag and stepped inside. The lobby smelled like old carpet and mildew. Behind the front desk sat a man, if you could call him that. His skin was thin, waxy, stretched tight over bones that seemed too sharp. He didn't look up, just sat still, too still, like a doll someone had forgotten to wind. Need a room? I said, my voice raw from hours of silence. His eyes, yellowed, cloudy, lifted to mine. Something about them made my stomach crawl. 103, he rasped, and his voice felt wrong, too dry, like it hadn't been used in years. He slid the key across the counter. His hand, long, brittle fingers, tipped with cracked nails, lingered too long on the metal. I didn't sign anything. He didn't ask. It was as if I was expected. The hallway was worse than the lobby, narrow, with wallpaper that peeled in long, curling strips, revealing something dark underneath. The carpet, faded and worn, muffled my steps too well, like it was swallowing sound. The air buzzed, faint, electric, like an old TV left on in another room. Room 103. The key slid in smoothly. The lock clicked with a sound that felt too final. The room was what you'd expect. Small, dim, a bed with a comforter older than I was, a nightstand with a dead lamp, and a TV from the Stone Age. The bathroom door hung open slightly. The mirror cracked from corner to corner. I dropped my bag and sat on the bed. The mattress sagged, and the smell, damp, earthy, clung to my clothes immediately. But it was a bed. And I was so tired. I didn't turn on the TV, I didn't undress, I just laid back and stared at the ceiling. That's when I noticed the clock. 3:03 a.m. The numbers glowed an angry red. I hadn't looked at the time since I checked in, but I knew it hadn't been that late, and worse, the second hand wasn't moving. A soft sound, tap, tap, tap. My body locked. It came from the window. I didn't move. The curtains were thin, so thin I could almost see the night beyond. The dark trees, the dead lot. But I couldn't see what was tapping. Tap, tap, tap. I swallowed, my throat dry and tight. My hand crept toward my bag where my revolver sat, cold and heavy. And then I saw it. The print. A small handprint on the inside of the window pane. Not fogged, not smudged, pressed. My breath quickened, my hand shook as I pulled the gun free. "Who's there?" I called, my voice cracking. The tapping stopped. The room fell into a vacuum of silence, so thick it pressed into my ears, into my chest. I felt my pulse hammering against my ribs. The bathroom door creaked. I froze. Slowly, my eyes slid toward it, the mirror. The crack? No, the reflection. I was there, but I wasn't me. My reflection smiled. Wide, too wide. My lips stretched, my teeth showing, but I hadn't moved. I felt ice bloom in my gut. My finger clenched the trigger, but my reflection's hand slowly lifted, a single finger pressed to its lips. Shh. The light overhead flickered and died. The room plunged into darkness, and my heart, God, my heart, felt like it would tear free from my chest. I ran. The door locked, the key gone. I kicked, pounded, nothing. My reflection, oh, that thing. Still visible in the mirror, still smiling, but now, oh, behind me. The tapping returned, but not from the window, from the wall, the inside wall. A voice, mine but not, whispered from the mirror. "You're staying." I didn't think. I fired. The gunshot exploded in the room, deafening. The mirror shattered, glass exploding in every direction, but the reflection, it didn't break. It stayed, intact, smiling. The tapping, now from everywhere. Walls, floor, ceiling. I screamed. The door finally gave. I stumbled into the hallway, the carpet sucking at my shoes, the lights flickered overhead, buzzing in the hallway. Longer than before, too long. I ran, doors on either side of me, each one marked 103. I passed them, but they opened. And from each, me. Twisted. Screaming, laughing, crawling, their eyes hollow, their mouths too wide. The hallway ended and I hit the exit door hard. It swung wide and I fell out, into the lobby, the front desk, the man, no, not a man, me, smiling, holding the key. Room 13, he rasped. The air folded. I was back. The room, the clock, 3:03 a.m. The tapping, the handprint, the mirror, the smile. I screamed. But it didn't come from me, it came from behind. After Hollowbrook, I stopped running. You can't outrun something that's already inside you. I learned that the hard way. The reflection in the mirror, the tapping on the windows, the endless faces with hollow eyes. Each one another crack, another reminder that I brought something back. The worst part? It wasn't just me. I started seeing the stories, people disappearing, places cursed, things that didn't belong in our world. I thought I was alone, but then I found Emma Hayes. Her story came through a local news thread, geologist missing at Crestfall Mine. But what caught me wasn't her disappearance, it was the photo of the mine entrance. Scrawled above the opening, barely visible through the rusted beams, were the same hollow-eyed faces I'd seen at Bloodstone, at Hollowbrook. It was spreading. And if Emma was still alive, she was running out of time. Crestfall Mine sat buried deep in the Colorado mountains, a relic from the Silver Rush, long since abandoned. The locals called it cursed. Miners who went in never came out. The company Emma worked for ignored that, of course. People always ignore the warnings. That's how these things start. The entrance loomed as I approached, gaping and black, like the earth had been wounded and never healed. The old warning signs, danger, collapsing risk, had long since faded. Only the carvings remained, hundreds of them gouged into the wooden beams. Hollow figures, their mouths open in silent agony. I stepped inside. The air turned cold immediately. Wet and heavy, like it had been waiting for something to breathe. My footsteps echoed against stone walls, but the sound felt swallowed, muffled. I kept moving, flashlight cutting through the dark. I followed the tracks deeper, my gut tightening with every step. Then I found the first one. It was human. Had been human. Now it was something else. The body was upright, pressed into the rock like it had been absorbed, its form hollowed out in perfect relief, skin stretched thin, eyes gone, mouth frozen mid-scream. I felt bile rise in my throat. But something worse. Its shape, its outline. A name tag, barely visible under the stone. K. Brooks. Kyle. Emma's intern. The hollow carving, fresh. The stone around him still wet. A voice, soft, whispering from somewhere too far, too close. Help me. I turned, and there, Emma's flashlight, abandoned on the ground, its beam flickering. The whispers grew, rising, filling the tunnels, not with words but with need. I grabbed the light and ran, following where the earth seemed to pull me. The walls squeezed tighter, forcing me to crouch. My breath quickened, then the whispers stopped. I entered a chamber and froze. The walls. They were covered in them. Hollow forms, hundreds, no, thousands, pressed into the stone, like the mine had consumed every soul it ever touched. But at the center, Emma. Her body not yet taken, her form half pressed into the wall, the stone was pulling her in, slow, merciless. Her eyes wide, her lips trembling. Please, she gasped, help me. Without thinking, I lunged, my hands gripping her arms. The stone fought back, like something alive, but I pulled, feeling my skin burn as the rock tried to take me too. The whispers returned, furious, hungry. Stay. The walls shifted, the hollow figures turned their heads, their mouths opening in a unified, silent scream. I ripped Emma free. She collapsed into me, gasping, her skin cold. Too cold. They see us, she choked. They want us. The ground shook. The walls closed. I pulled her up. Run! We bolted, the mines screaming around us, the hollow forms emerging from the stone, their faces blank, their hands clawing. The tunnel twisted, but the entrance, light, faint, and distant. I saw it. But Emma stopped, her eyes wide, wide pupils, gone. She turned. Behind her, on the wall, her hollow form. Already. Have me, she whispered. The stone took her, fast, gone, I screamed, and the tunnel collapsed. Darkness, silence, but not death. I woke outside, the mine entrance, gone, buried, and beside me, a new carving, fresh, Emma, hollow, and under it, another space, empty, waiting for me. I left Crestfall Mine, but it didn't leave me. Something stayed inside. A crack in my mind, a shadow in my breath. The faces, the voices, the hollow ones, they followed me in every reflection and every silence. But worst of all, I kept hearing the signal, not just in dreams. I heard it in the static on the radio, in the hum of power lines, and in the spaces between my own thoughts. And under it, Emma's voice. Don't let him in. It wasn't coming from the mine. The source was somewhere else, broadcasting from the coast. Ravenbrook Lighthouse. The lighthouse was supposed to be abandoned, but when I arrived, its beam was cutting through the fog, slow and steady. No one should have been there. The place was sealed off years ago after the last keeper vanished without a trace. But the light was on, as if it had been waiting for me. The front gate hung open, the metal bent as if something forced its way through. I stepped inside. The air tasted like salt, copper, and something sour and rotten, like blood and mildew. The old wooden doors were cracked open, so I pushed my way through into the cold, damp corridor beyond. The place felt dead, but I heard something. Static. It was coming from the keeper's room, low and constant. I followed the sound, my boots scraping against the wet stone floor. Inside, an old radio sat on a desk. It was ancient, covered in dust, but it was on. The speaker hissed with static, and through the distortion I heard something that froze my blood. It was my own voice. "He's here. Don't let him in." My throat locked and my skin went cold. I felt something behind the static. Something listening. I took a step back, and then I heard another voice. "Emma. You have to stop the signal." The radio let out a sharp screech, and the lights flickered. A second later, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming from above. I gripped my flashlight so hard my knuckles ached. The beam trembled as I turned toward the staircase leading up to the lantern room. I didn't call out. I couldn't. I just climbed. The stairs felt endless, and the air grew colder with every step. The walls on either side, they weren't smooth anymore. They were rough and jagged, and as I raised my flashlight, I saw what covered them. Faces. Hundreds of them. Some screaming, some blank, all hollow. Then I saw her. Emma. Her face was part of the wall, her mouth frozen in a silent scream. Her eyes were gone, and her skin looked like it had been pulled into the stone, trapped forever. I felt something press into my head, words without sound. "You brought him here." I reached the top. The lantern room was cold and filled with fog, pressing against the windows. The massive lamp at the center was shattered and broken, but it was still turning, casting nothing but shadows, and standing beside it was me. I froze. The figure wore my face, but his skin was too pale, and his eyes were two black holes. His lips were stretched too wide, his teeth too many. And when he spoke, it was my voice, but broken. "You opened every door, through the trees, across the water, beneath the earth, through the glass, and now?" He stepped forward, and the air felt like it was crushing me from the inside. "Now you let me in." My knees went weak, my chest felt tight. "What are you?" The thing wearing my face tilted its head. "I am what you heard in the dark. I am the breath behind the mirror. I am the signal." The shattered lamp above us blazed to life. It wasn't light, it was a broadcast. The sound roared into my head, and through it, I heard every voice. Jacob from the cabin, Bill and David from the lake, Kevin from the bridge, Daniel from room 103. Emma from the mine, all of them screaming. They were still here. The signal hadn't been a warning, it was a door, and I was the one holding it open. The thing with my face reached out its hand. I felt my body locking up, my bones screaming, my vision blurring. Blood ran from my ears. I couldn't breathe. But beneath the noise, I heard her, "Emma, stop the signal, destroy it, don't let him out." But the other voice, the one inside my head, was still there. "If you stop the signal, you die with it. Your body, your soul, you'll be here forever." My fingers found the control panel. I saw the switch, the main power cut off. I could stop it. But if I did, I knew the truth. I wouldn't walk out of here. Emma's voice whispered one last time, "Do it." The other voice laughed. "No one will know you. No one will remember. You'll be nothing." I screamed back at it, and I threw the switch. The signal died, the lamp exploded into shards, the roar cut out, and everything went silent. I woke, but there was no lighthouse, no floor, no sky, only static. I couldn't feel my body, I couldn't feel anything, but I wasn't alone. The others, Jacob, Bill, David, Kevin, Daniel, Emma, they were here, and now, so was I. But he, whatever he was, wasn't. I had locked him out. The lighthouse was dark, the signal was dead, the door was closed. But sometimes, if you turn to an empty station, if you listen to the hiss of a dead channel, you'll hear me. You'll hear us. Don't let him in, because if you're hearing this, it means the signal has found you. Horror stories are more than just tales meant to scare you. They are reflections of our choices, our fears, and the consequences of what we choose to ignore. Through these 6 chilling stories, Jacob's night of terror in the woods, Bill and David's haunting encounter at the lake, Kevin's confrontation beneath the bridge, Daniel's nightmare in room 103, Emma's final moments in the mine, and my own battle at the Ravenbrook Lighthouse, one truth becomes clear. The most dangerous doors are the ones we open ourselves. Each character faced the unknown, and what sealed their fate wasn't just the monsters they encountered, it was their choices. They ignored warnings, pushed boundaries, and let curiosity lead them too far into the darkness. But haven't we all done the same in life? We dismiss our instincts, silence our fears, and cross lines we know we shouldn't, until it's too late. So, what can we learn from their stories? First, trust your instincts. Fear is often our mind's way of protecting us. When something feels wrong, it usually is. How many times did they hear a whisper, see a shadow, or feel a chill and brush it off? Don't ignore that inner voice telling you to run, to question, or to turn back. Second, respect the unknown. Curiosity may be human nature, but some things are better left undiscovered. The world is full of mysteries. Some beautiful, others terrifying. But not every locked door needs to be opened. As Emma learned in Crestfall Mine, and as I learned at Ravenbrook, some knowledge comes at too high a price. Third, the past leaves echoes. The horrors in these stories didn't come from nowhere. They were born from forgotten tragedies, restless spirits, and things left unresolved. The scars of the past can haunt not just places, but people. Ignoring history doesn't erase it. It only lets it fester in the dark. Lastly, every choice has consequences. Whether it was Jacob choosing the wrong cabin, Bill and David ignoring the man at the lake, or Kevin confronting the stranger under the bridge, their actions had ripples. Sometimes we don't get second chances to undo a mistake, so choose wisely. But there is another side to these stories, one of bravery. Despite their fear, each character fought to survive. Emma tried to save Kyle, I tried to stop the signal. Horror may show us darkness, but it also shows us courage, the raw, desperate kind that comes when you have everything to lose. Now, I want to turn to you, the listener. You have stayed with me through every chilling moment, every scream, every shadow, and for that, I am deeply grateful. Enigma of the Unknown wouldn't exist without your support, your comments, and your love for these stories. You are part of this journey, part of this exploration into the strange, the eerie, and the unexplained. So, if these stories kept you on the edge of your seat or made you check under your bed tonight, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more nightmares to come. And don't forget to hit that bell, because the scariest stories are the ones that find you when you least expect them. Stay curious. Stay safe, and above all, don't let him in. This is Enigma of the Unknown. Thanks for listening. See you in the next story.